everyone. Today we have our new episode, and this is very popular topic, very important topic, and we get a very good response from Africa, from Singapore, everywhere. So maybe more speakers will join today's session. It will be very interesting topic. We have our world famous speaker, Professor Edward, Professor David Smith. We have our subject matter expert, Mr. Tuomas from Finland, Professor Kim from USA. They are the subject matter expert of this quantum computing, as well as we have our other speaker, Professor Donald, Professor Rob, and Mr. Adam. First, I want to give chance Professor Edward, what you want to share about quantum computing.
Well, yes, this is a very interesting topic indeed, and I can only be on for a few minutes here, but I want to start out by saying that a friend of mine who deals with lobbying, but deals with lots of businesses, posted recently on LinkedIn asking for and soliciting people for jobs working in quantum issues. I say that because this is the World Talent Economic Forum. And your listeners are no doubt saying, well, what does this have to do with me and my future? And what I'm saying is I'm looking at somebody who's posting, hey, we need people who are competent in this area because this is the important area in technology in the future. So if you're listening on the World Talent Economic Forum and you're a talent or want to be talented in quantum computing, well, you've got a future ahead of you, okay? Just go on LinkedIn and start picking up the jobs. Okay, but let me back off and say a few more basic things just to bring your audience up to date. Normal computing, as you probably know, deals with zeros and ones. All of this that goes into our computers and our software and so forth is ultimately based on and off switches. It's either zero, it's either on or it's off. It's either 0 or 1. We're doing a lot of great things with it. For example, having this discussion right now with people all around the world. But of course, at the atomic level, atoms don't just act like zeros and ones. There's at the quantum level, there's all these in betweens. So if we can harness that at the quantum level, quantum properties, we can do computing much faster. In some cases, they say perhaps 1 trillion times faster. Literally, we're talking about those kinds of quantities. Recently, a lot of companies have gotten involved in this. Google, IBM. In 2019, Google claimed that its quantum computer project had basically solved an insolvable problem in 200 seconds that normally would take a normal computer 10,000 years to solve. Now, you can question that, but the point is that you have the big companies like Google, IBM, and so forth, investing a lot of time, a lot of effort in quantum computing because they see that as the wave of the future. I'll mention one other thing. We've had discussions in this forum on artificial general intelligence. That is not just computer programs that do the sort of things that we're doing right now, but really thinking programs. Artificial general intelligence is not just for some defined area, but being able to think literally like a human being, actually much better than a human being. That sort of capacity really I think is only going to be available when we get quantum computing as a reality. I'm sure David Smith will talk a little bit about the fact that this has been something that's been thought about for some decades now, but what we see literally in the last year or two is quantum computing coming into its own. Not commercially ready yet, but perhaps David can tell us when he suspects that we're going to all be doing this in quantum computing, when we're going to have artificial general intelligence. Our brains are going to be basically hooked up to an artificial general intelligence. So maybe David can tell us when that's all coming, because we'll all be excited to hear that.
Thank you. Professor Kim, you are a scientist, and what you want to add about this topic, quantum computing, and is in terms of research, like how does it work in the research lab to develop this quantum computing?
Well, this has been going on for quite some time. And NC State and the computer science department, we're so very honored to have the access to the quantum computers that IBM provides. But what I want to mention about this is not so much how fast we use something or how much better it's going to calculate something. It's the data that we feed it. Okay, and no computer, no system is worth a darn if you feed it bad information. All systems are based on the information that we feed them. Artificial intelligence is not intelligent any more than human intelligence. Why? Because we feed it. So one of the things I try to influence people is when we are utilizing these tools, let's don't try to replace humans. Okay, and that's what they want to do. They want to replace humans in their jobs, but the computer system lacks one major element that we need, and that's empathy. Right? I just don't think you'll ever be able to program a computer to calculate emotions and empathy. I mean, you can give it these fake things, program in it as much as you want. I get Siri now saying things to me, or Alexa saying things like "Have a good day," but that element of real empathy and real love, caring, it's only going to care as much as you program it to. And I mean, some of my favorite movies, because I always tell people our science fiction stories almost predict what happens in our future, right? Like so many things that people wrote about, we end up doing. Is it because we want to be like them, or because they can predict the future, or maybe because they have been in the future and came back and wrote about it? Who knows, right? Who knows? Do we really know? And this is one of the things I mentioned in one of my commencement speeches, is whatever we build and design in science today as a fact will be proven wrong another day in time. They just will. I mean, nothing is a fact because humans give it a definition. Is it the real definition? We don't know. The Earth was flat at one time, then it's round. Now there are people who say it's flat again. Pluto is a planet. Now it's not. Now, I mean, so the thing is that we just need to learn to use these tools, this technology, for our benefit, but don't try to replace humans. Artificial intelligence is only as intelligent as the human intelligence, HI, and we need to be very, very careful with how we use it, because everything that we have ever designed and developed and engineered for the good of man has also been reversed and used against the good of man. So just, find the good uses for it and proceed. When you say something calculates faster and better, that's great, but let's utilize it for things that can be done. But be very careful with, it's like media. Do you trust anything media tells you today? No. The information that they're fed isn't all real. A computer is the same thing. And we need to remember that. And I'm watching all of our new scientists and celebrities, and everyone's talking about this metaverse in the future. And I guess that's where quantum computing is going to come in, because you can fit so much more in a quantum computer. But I will share this with you that's kind of funny. We were sitting in a big meeting about, just before COVID, one of our board of advisors meetings, or it was, I forget which one, but anyway, it was in the computer science department at NC State. And we were talking about the quantum computer that IBM is allowing access to. And people really didn't know how to use it. They really did not know how to use it yet. There was just, everyone was excited about it. Everyone was, but there were so many things unknown. And I think that we just need to start focusing on where to go. And I hear so many people, companies say, oh, we've got the better one, or we've got the better one. I don't know which one's going to be better. But in my experience of 40 years in telecom, datacom, and watching it grow from one element to the other, and being the head engineer of the first broadband network that cut over, in all of these elements, what's going to matter most is how we interface interface and interconnect in our standards. All right. And I don't see any organization stepping up to the plate to enforce quality of standards, to enforce that we have universal adoption. And that's what we need. We need some uniformity. And I'm sorry to take up so much of this platform, but I have been part of the evolution of telecom from when it was a stepping switch, from computers when we used punch cards. And I have watched and been a part of the evolution all the way through. And I have seen a lot of major mistakes made over the years because we did not set up uniformity. We did not set up quality of standards. We did not make things globally interconnect the way they should. And we need to do that. That's my platform.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kim, for your excellent contribution. Professor David Smith, what you want to add for today's discussion?
Well, I think I'm going to vote for Professor Kim with her platform of putting standards in place in quantum computing. It's very much where we need to go, where we need to do it. We're seeing steps towards that way. If you look inside IEEE, over in ISO world, and several of the things that have been put in place in the United States by both the current president and the president before, there's definitely movement in that direction. One of the things I'd like to do is just kind of go back and understand where quantum computing is, because we haven't done that yet today. Well, first of all, let's talk about market size. Today, we're at about a $400 million market, and it's projected to grow about 30% a year, which I think is a very interesting market growth. So let's step back, and Ed jumped straight into the jobs. Quantum computing really are computers that mimic behavior of atoms and subatomic particles to really drastically increase processing speed. One of the interesting things compared to classic computing is you can entangle the atoms there. They can either be excited or not excited, or they can be both, or they can be somewhere in between them. So they can have multiple states, where in a classic computer, it's either 0 or 1, and you begin to use it that way. There's a whole lot of details on it that we could jump into, but I think one of the important things to understand as we look at quantum computing is it goes well beyond just a computing engine. Quantum communications will allow me to do instant communications anywhere where we can have a quantum effect going on. So it could be the other side of the world, it could be in space, it could be other elements, it could be on the moon. And so quantum communications is going to be a huge breakthrough. We've all heard about quantum cryptography and how it's going to make encryption obsolete. Well, it will make some forms of encryption obsolete, but we now have put in place quantum proof encryption in some high demand areas that is working. But quantum will change the security posture that we have used for decades in our work. It's going to hit other places. I'm on the board of a quantum transportation company that is using quantum effects and angular momentum to be able to change transportation in space, in air, on the ground. And it's a totally different approach where it's not using petroleum, it's not using batteries and things to be able to move and work. And as Kim has said, there is now a lot of quantum computing being made available as a service. You see companies like IBM, she mentioned, Google, NVIDIA, Microsoft, all are making quantum computing available to users. But quantum computing has been around for quite a while. The first mentions of quantum computing really came out in the late 70s and where that was going. And then we saw later on, Richard Feynman really put the place in place in 1986 when he introduced an early version of the quantum circuit notation. Then you saw Shor develop a quantum algorithm and others going forward. But it really is, for the early parts of quantum computing, it was the government who was driving quantum computing. I fortunately got into this in the early days. For one of the government agencies in 1993, I did the very first quantum computing forecast for them. And then later that year, we developed the first classified quantum computing roadmap going forward. And what's interesting is I've looked at that roadmap recently, and it's actually still tracking pretty well all the way back this far forward from 1993. But quantum computing is just an evolutionary step and a very large one as we look at how computing is going to be done in the future. I mean, we see the changes. We also see biological computing, which has a lead-lag relationship with quantum computing. It's emerging as well at this day. We see the ability to begin to use it very broadly. One of the very interesting applications of it recently is it's been proposed a intergalactical quantum computing internet as a way to begin to use the elements of quantum teleportation to begin to put a very fast internet that could work out beyond our solar system, where that as it is today, if I try to transmit data from out in our solar system, it takes hours and days to get the data back and forth. So this is another approach of quantum computing. Sharif, I could talk your whole hour on quantum computing, but let me stop there since you have quite a few people on the line and let them go ahead and jump in.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. We have our another subject matter expert from Finland, Mr. Thomas. So what you want to add for today's discussion, and we want some practical example and experience from your lab.
Yes, very interesting, and I would like to bring also about the notion about the quantum intelligence, that it's a kind of a new topic also, and one of the kind of part of this is the quantum machine learning, and right now it's an area that has evolved like from the AI techniques to embed the quantum calculations for the machine learning techniques. And so we can describe the like artificial intelligence, and machine learning is part of the artificial intelligence. The quantum intelligence is like the bigger area, and the quantum machine learning is part of that. And I'd like also to bring about the discussion about the quantum network, and how it's this kind of relational network with a hierarchy and a hierarchical structure, and when the changes propagate in the network, the parts of the network can then be measured, and they output the calculations of the situation of the network. One of the applications area right now is kind of the logistics area, the medical area, financial area, and the risk analysis area. One of the new areas and a very interesting area would be to bring the techniques also to healthcare and sustainability and new energy discoveries, and one right now, new use cases is like energy grid optimizations that D-Wave has been like progressing, and so to think about like the normal areas like shopping and product design and how those are also involved with the quantum computing in the future. And it's interesting also to see about the startups, and it would be interesting to see new theoretical startups also, like examining more about the entanglement and the structure of entanglement, and how it's additional to the current standard model, and how to describe the entanglement like in a better way.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Professor Rob.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, we're quantum computing. Okay. Quantum computing is largely a theoretical area of computer science. We are currently developing the methodologies to program the computers. We do not have a viable quantum computer yet. We have simulations of quantum computers. We look for something called quantum supremacy, where we can point to a quantum computer that can do at least one thing a normal computer can do and do it better. Quantum computers are best for massive data sets. So if you want to calculate how the universe is going to evolve, that's a quantum computer problem. If you want to forecast global weather, that's a quantum computer problem. It is not really used for product design and it's unlikely to be used in those areas. Quantum computers are very expensive in terms of being able to use them, and they use a concept called a qubit to define their capability. And right now, the capability in terms of qubits are still around a decade back from practical application. The discussions of quantum computer and artificial intelligence are premature. It's not clear that if a quantum computer was intelligent, we would recognize that intelligence. The way a quantum computer calculates and solves problems is very different from how a human brain calculates and solves problems. And that makes it very hard for us biological creatures to anticipate what intelligence at a quantum level would be. A quantum computer is just able to look at data in such large amounts so very quickly that it's really beyond our capability of fully understanding what it can or cannot do, at least until we get to a point where we can begin experimenting with a real quantum computer that can outperform a regular computer. Most of the IBM stuff is all simulation. In terms of development, they've been the leader in terms of providing platforms to train people how to program quantum computers, so that once they are available, we'll have a base of folks that can do work on them. They're not when we talk about the market for quantum computers, there isn't one really outside of education and experimentation at the moment, because we haven't reached quantum supremacy yet. So that means that a regular computer can do the same job better, faster, cheaper than a quantum computer has. We've had several false starts with quantum computers. Google thought that they had one a few years back, but it underperformed a regular computer rather substantially. China's announced that they are either close to or have achieved quantum supremacy, but a lot of stuff out of China you have to take with a grain of salt with regard to their accomplishments. Their peer review process sometimes leaves a little bit to be desired, but it is a game changer. Others have pointed out quantum technology in most every area. The interesting thing about quantum communication is you can know if a piece of data has been observed. So if you create a secure link and you use quantum methodology, if somebody were to intercept that data stream, you would know immediately that it was intercepted, and that is handy with regard to security. Also, with regard to security, you have the ability for a quantum computer to decrypt pretty much anything in microseconds. Every level of encryption we have today, as soon as quantum computers become real, becomes obsolete, and that's problematic. IBM just recently announced an initiative around quantum security, where even though quantum computers aren't yet working, their system will generate keys that are arguably, once again, until you have quantum computers, it's hard to test this, but are arguably quantum computer safe or proof. And certainly the recommendation is, particularly for governments that need this information to remain safe, that they probably should be moving to this methodology pretty aggressively, because what you recognize is, no matter how well encrypted something is, if the data is stolen, somebody can sit on that data until they can decrypt it, giving them an almost unlimited period of time to do so. And quantum computers cut down that limit rather dramatically. It is important to look at how quantum computers are used and how they are not used, or will be used, and how they probably won't be used. They'll be used to solve some of the biggest problems of the universe. Certainly major biological problems with lots of moving parts, universal problems with lots of moving parts, global weather problems with lots of moving parts, but they're not really practical for doing the accounting or for creating a conversational computer. I mean, you'd have to do so much heavy lifting to make the technology force fit into a function that we can better do today with other things. The conversations with regard to standards, we do, as David Smith pointed out, we have the IEEE and other standards bodies that are working aggressively for worldwide standards. It really, with regard to standards, it depends on the governments and depends on the companies to adhere to them. The issue with standards is it's hard to develop a competitive edge if you're heavily focused on standards. On the other hand, if you don't have standards, it's hard to get to scale. So a company has to make a determination early on whether they're going to be standards focused or not. In telecommunications, you kind of have to be standards focused in order to interoperate work. In other areas, for instance, development of defense weapons and the rest, the use of standards may not be as important. In fact, other than interoperability in the battlefield, you probably don't want everybody to know what the heck it is you're doing in terms of your development. And so those kinds of things are not only less important, but are devalued. So it really goes back to the underlying goal of the project. But do recognize quantum computers, an interesting area. It's brand new. Most projections have quantum supremacy still out 5 to 10 years before we get to a practical computer, which means you're mostly talking about research and development right now, which it's really hard to scale. And we're talking about a lot, and when we talk about a lot of the initiatives that we're watching emerge, autonomous machines, artificial intelligence, quantum computers right now are playing no role. I mean no role. The core elements for autonomous machines are all traditional computer elements, and the efforts we've got now with artificial intelligence are all traditional computer elements, with some efforts around the biological computing area that David Smith brought up, as well as we try to mold a computer into an emulation of the human brain, which I think for a lot of us seems to be, trying to put a square peg in a round hole. The level of technology that we have suggests that we should be working against an intelligence model that is not based on the human brain, and that is more based on what the computer does well, as opposed to what we do and how we do it. But that goes to the problem of anything that is as revolutionary as quantum computing applied to intelligence, in that it will be so fast and it will look at the world so differently that it is hard for me to see how we would be able to bridge the gap to understand that intelligence once it emerged. Several people have popped up over the last year and argued we've already achieved true artificial intelligence. We just haven't perceived it yet. And do recognize in the biological world, we just recently figured out that an octopus was intelligent, for instance, and very intelligent, as a matter of fact, very highly problem solving, very capable, and unsurprisingly, we're still eating them. So in the end, it really comes down to what you can do with the computer and when you can do it. In quantum supremacy, the use of a quantum computer to exceed the capabilities of a normal computer has not yet been achieved yet, at least not demonstrably been achieved yet, and appears to be in the future. And the computers used, the technologies used for transmission and for security is now starting to move to market with the possibility of a level of encryption and protection with regard to security that is, at least for the short term, unbreachable, something we absolutely need with state level actors doing hostile things all across the world. So it's a fascinating technology. Certainly it's an interesting technology to get on the ground floor with, but we're probably at least a decade out from any broad expansion, and that expansion will largely occur against large data sets and massive problems first, where the quantum computer arguably is superior. Because otherwise, if your PC or your server does the job better, faster, cheaper than a quantum computer does, or at least better, cheaper than a quantum computer does, you're still going to use that for the foreseeable future. The methodology that you're going to need to convert from standard computing practices and languages to quantum computing is massively different. It's black and white, and so the bridge between the two technologies, which still has to be established, is going to take a while to come forward.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Professor Donald, what you want to add for quantum computing?
Well, I want to clarify one thing about quantum computing and the quantum world in general. It's something that Richard Feynman said. He says, if you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand it. It's incredibly Byzantine, and if you spend some time looking at qubits and how they work, it's not absolutes the way that we're used to ones and zeros. It has to do with probabilities. So there's a probability that it's in a certain state, and we're able to use those probabilities to basically translate the quantum states into ones and zeros. So and it allows us, because of what's called quantum superposition, there's basically a number of states happening at the exact same time in a conceptual sense. And again, remember, everything that I tell you and I say is just sort of an analogy to what's happening. In order to understand it, you have to be very, very, very fluid in tensor calculus and Lie algebras and things like that, but which I'm not, so I'm only pretending. But the upshot of what I'm getting there is that there's errors when you're looking at probability. So right now, the biggest problem with quantum computers is that they make mistakes too often, and there's no error correction that we've developed yet to make quantum computers completely reliable. And that's the reason that they're not everywhere. One of the reasons, besides the fact that they're enormously expensive. And so it's a research area. So it's an exciting research area. It's an incredibly amazing idea that what we can do is we can look at much smaller than the atom. We're looking at the very parts of atoms, the quantum states that are the parts of the universe that make up atoms. It's an amazing kind of thing. And so in theory, if these worked, they would be so incredibly much faster than current computers, because the electrons have to travel from one atom to the other, and there's all these reasons why it's much, much slower. But right now they don't. And the way that we're using them right now is we're making them isomorphic to regular computers. And basically, so anything that's not 100% true. We're actually able to use them and program them in a special way that's quantum computers. But as David said, and others have said, there are computers right now that simulate quantum computers. So if you think about that, what that means is that everything a quantum computer does, a regular computer can do, or a current computer can do, just much more slowly. So basically, anything that a regular computer can do, a quantum computer can do, and everything a quantum computer can do, a regular computer can do, just much, much, much more slowly. And all this talk about general artificial intelligence, I find amusing, because what happens if you have a pocket calculator and you can do calculations? You can compute the mortgage on your house, or the mortgage payments on a house you want to buy, or something like that, and you make it faster and faster and faster and faster until it's like a million, a billion, a trillion times faster than any calculator that's ever existed in history. And you give it so much memory that you could store so incredibly much in that calculator that no one can even comprehend how much you can store in that calculator. Why is that calculator suddenly going to become intelligent? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. We have to kind of figure out why a computer. We say a computer solves problems. It's not solving its problems. It's solving our problems. Like, we think up a problem, and then we specify the problem in very, very, very much detail, and then we give that problem to the computer. And if we specify the problem wrong, we get the wrong answer. The only way that we manage to get a computer to do anything for us is by telling it in a great deal of detail what we want it to do. And computers don't have problems. If a computer crashes, it's not the computer's problem, it's our problem. So the idea, and then the whole idea of general intelligence that Edward keeps talking about, when are we going to spend the money to teach a computer that would repair a car to be able to cook breakfast for us? I mean, what exactly is the point of doing that? Because that's what general intelligence means. It means it knows all the general kinds of things that a human being does. And it's true that quantum computers, if they're doing things so incredibly much faster, that when you look at learning in artificial intelligence, machine learning, what it's doing is you give it a data set, and you basically say in this data set, you have somebody identify all the faces in a million pictures, and then you feed those million pictures in it, and it trains it to recognize the probability that a given pixel is going to be in a face. And it eventually gets to the point that when you give it a picture that it hasn't seen before, it recognizes the probability that that pixel is going to be in a face accurately enough that it starts to be able to recognize faces. It does the same thing with voice. It does the same thing even with driving. That's why self-driving has been so slow to work, because you have to be able to, it's not good at things that aren't normal. It trains it to do the things that are common, but it's not good at doing things that are different than what it's been trained to do. So that takes a long time. It takes a huge amount of computational power. And so with quantum computers, that could be done incredibly much faster, but it's still just training itself to do the most average thing. It's nothing related to intelligence. So I wouldn't really, so right now, these things are exciting and wonderful. And if you can, and you can get into the academic computing world, you can, it could be a good thing. I was sitting in Palo Alto and I kept talking to this guy next to me, and he was from, I think he was from Scotland, or is Edinburgh. Yeah, he was from Edinburgh, and he was an expert at quantum computing, and he was visiting Google campus to talk about quantum computing with Google. And so that would be your life, flying around to interesting places, having interesting meetings with really smart people to discuss the science of the future and do complicated math and try and figure out how quantum computing would work. And that's really where it is right now. So have fun.
Thank you.
It's something that could
Thank
be
you.
fun.
Mr. Adam. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. So I think we are in the age of existential risks at this moment. Global connectivity has shrunk our world like a jumper in a washing machine. No country is an island, no population is an island, and especially now. What happens in one corner of the globe is felt by people in the other three corners. Implications and consequences affect all of us, more people than ever and faster than ever. Whether it's a nuclear crisis or averted near crisis, global warming, population, poisoning of our oceans and seas, wars and world wars, which are appropriately named but under terrible circumstance. Also worldwide pandemics. So where some of the world goes, the rest of the world goes with it. So all of these are existential risks. And if we as a collective species, or our leaders and rulers rather, make the wrong choice to go down the wrong road, well then that could spell doom for the whole species, including vaporizing all proof that we ever existed at all. Entire cities and rich archaeological resources and libraries scorched into dust that is then blown around the universe, spreading out. So I think it would be wise to definitely approach quantum computing with similar levels of caution. Artificial intelligence, real artificial intelligence, true AI, if there ever can be a thing, would require so much power that old-fashioned ones and zeros would not be enough and require something a lot more powerful. Enter quantum computing. Within transhumanism and futurism, there is a thread of singularitarians who see AI through a messianic lens, or savior AI, if you will. It's this otherworldly or afterworldly rapture where people think that they will be carried away into paradise by a compassionate super AI. So they outsource a lot of their energy and optimism into a futuristic event, despite all the work that still needs to be done here in the present and now. But unfortunately, greater sentience, sapience, self-awareness, etc., does not always correlate with similarly greater and greater compassion, kindness, moral values that are more and more inclusive. And unfortunately, it is sometimes the opposite case. Arguably, we humans exist on a higher order of magnitude to many non-human animals in terms of, again, sentience, sapience, self-awareness. So some would disagree, but just for the sake of this discussion. And yet, despite being more intelligent than animals, we have the capacity to be way more cruel and sadistic to each other and lower order animals, way more than animals to humans or animals amongst themselves in this Darwinian predator-prey system. So because of that, it's not hard for me to imagine a super intelligent AI going psychotic and doing heinous things to us. If you take a person with an IQ of 140, for example, and you drop them in a society of people who have an average IQ of, say, 90, then a lot of the aforementioned kind of messianism would not be there. The intelligent person would start to feel hateful and resentful, and the less intelligent would be jealous and wary, leading to trouble. And I worry that could be the same with AI and quantum computing, and it would no longer be a simple case of pulling the plug if things start going sideways. So that is why quantum computers and AI should be treated as an existential risk, or X risk, in terms of both astronomically large negative consequences for humans in terms of suffering or extinction, and global totalitarianism. So this is probably the first time in human history where we are faced with a real possibility of coercive life extension or immortality against one's will, leading to I have no mouth but I must scream scenarios. Will we need to draft treaties and guidelines for quantum computers and AI like we tried to do with nuclear power? And reading about China pioneering their own innovations within this field fills me with dread. But not only that, we also need to make sure that these inventions do not mess around with our own history, our own timeline, creating unforeseen and perhaps irreversible temporal consequences. But on the other hand, imagine that what we can achieve using a brain-computer interface, interfacing the human brain with a quantum computer, with how much they can store and how quickly they can do calculations. We will, and we do, face problems that require knowledge from all the different fields of science and engineering. But we can only do so much having just the one brain we were all born with. Therefore, we have numerous blind spots and weaknesses. But ECIs between humans and quantum computers will allow us to synthesize all the spheres of human invention, endeavor, research, and innovation, thereby better equipping us to deal with other X risks involving big chaotic systems such as global warming, asteroids hurtling towards Earth, and so on. But I do have the feeling that quantum computing will end up having unforeseen circumstances and consequences like nuclear, or again, like nuclear, many circumstances and consequences that were well and truly foreseen and predicted, but by only an exclusive circle of experts and thinkers, but kept a secret from the rest of the world. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Long discussion, Professor Ching. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. First, some quantum computing basic. Okay, first, it's potentially huge. Okay, there are lots of elements. Okay, secondly, it's fast. The third one is not quite known to the current society. That is, it's completely automated. See, I'm the person who solved the complete automated software. Okay, so this is good. Okay, this is good. We have a computer which is completely automated, which is existing nature. Okay, so basic quantum computing is a simulation of quantum mechanics, started by Richard Feynman, and it can do things that quantum mechanics. It simulates quantum mechanics, so it can solve problems which are similar to quantum mechanics. Okay, so I had recently, I had numerous discussions with quantum mechanics expert here in UC Berkeley, and our conclusion is that my conclusion is that quantum computing opened up a new way of thinking in computers. Okay, my conclusion is that everything in the universe is a computer. Okay, which is not recognized by anybody. Okay, if it does not compute, it cannot exist. Okay, so this what I say now is very new, not speculation. It's all technically based. Okay, not generality. Okay, so what we need to do is to, let's just go back to quantum computing, not to straight from this area. Quantum computing obeys quantum mechanics, and such as Schrodinger's equation is a qubit 0, 1, but it's still 0, 1, based on superposition, representative of a probability. Quantum entanglement can be calculated. Okay, allowed to be calculated. So basically, this is a viable system. You have lots of elements, subatomic elements, and you try to follow how they change. And you look for problems which fit into this very fast, very large system, potentially large system. Now they have very small system. So basically, it hasn't shown its potential. But on the other hand, since I say that everything in the universe is a computer, okay, the computer we build here on Earth is probably the most clumsy of all the computers. Okay, now we move into a direction where we use nature's computer. Okay, that is interesting. Okay, but nature's computer, let me tell you, my bet will be on DNA computing. Okay, DNA is already 0, 1, 2, 3. It's completely automated. And I solved the problem which fit into DNA computer. Okay, using integers as source code, not English like computing language. Okay, and the DNA can store. See, nothing can store more information than DNA. Okay, and it's in the path of self-creation. Mankind's self-creation is the goal of existence. Okay, because when we can create ourselves, what we created can do anything we can do. It replaces us. So we achieve a goal of existence, it will carry on. Okay, so the quantum computing open a new area And then my friends, who's probably one of the two top authority on the West Coast. Okay, he said quantum computer will not work. His conclusion. Okay, I just quote what he said. Okay, my feeling is it doesn't really matter whether it works or not. We look at anything. You see, you bring me anything, I tell you it's a computer. Okay, somewhere that it's operating in certain ways, and it computes. We cannot control it. Okay, that's the key to quantum computing. So far, we have difficulty in controlling it. The more we can control it, the more qubit we get, the more we can do this, get going with computer. But so I'm not going to speculate anymore, talk any generality about what this is. But still, it opens up a good area. Okay, thanks.
This is excellent discussion and excellent insight from the industry and from the research lab. I'm sure as World Talent Economy Forum has a lot of collaborations with academy and government, many student and youth community, they can understand what is quantum computing from Asia and from the developing world. They can do their research, and definitely those who want more support, we have our honorable board of advisors and the speakers. I'm sure our speakers going to help our youth community. I directly want to go for the concluding remark. This is very interesting discussions. We get different views from different speakers. Professor Kim, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Can you say that again? It was hard hearing you.
Oh, okay. What is your concluding remarks for today?
My conclusion today is that I think that we are all so open to what quantum computing can offer us, but I think that there's still a lot of confusion about how to interface it. I agree right now it's just a simulation tool. Rob couldn't have said this any better, that we're still using, it's still being used as simulation. I think there's some great ideas and uses for it, but we haven't tapped into its full potential. But honestly, I think that we have spent so many years developing what it is, that I think that there might be something bigger and greater out there, and maybe we will tap into that. I mean, I think we haven't tapped into a full potential, and I think that we need to start focusing more on our solutions and needs of this world and uniting them, rather than just relying on the DNA of a computer. Exactly. I'll let you talk about that, Adam. But funny as it may sound, I have often wonder how well will this computer play chess. It's just, it's just, I have to ask that question sometimes, because we do so many goofy things with our systems. But I hope that we continue to try to find the solutions. And I love listening to all the different views of our past, present, and future of what we are doing in quantum. And I look forward to your next panel discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kim. Definitely, we're going to invite you more for our panel discussions, as well as we are launching conference in different countries, especially developing world, Singapore and India. We will launch, and we will invite you as speakers for our conference, and hopefully it will be very, very interesting, because different NGO and government, they are collaborating with World Talent Economy Forum for this kind of dialogue. Professor Rob, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Well, it's interesting. I'm actually published an article talking about how you'd apply quantum computing to artificial intelligence, and basically it's a layered approach. Use the quantum computer to do the heavy analysis. Much of what we do with computing is a sampling approach, where we take a subset of a population and we estimate what the population is going to do based on that subset. The sampling methodology does lead to measurable errors. We call them confidence intervals. What a quantum computer can do, though, is they can look at the entire data set and do it real time. And so The advantage, say, for instance, if you were to have an AI-driven internal audit function, you would identify whatever fraud that was in the company, as long as that fraud was captured by one of the company's electronic systems, which is pretty much every transaction right now, instantly. But an example, when I was an auditor, we walked into an area and we identified a problem that could result in fraud, and a month later we found out there was fraud occurring. But it wasn't picked up on our sample. We just identified a process problem that could allow the fraud to occur. And strangely enough, it was occurring right under everybody's nose. But that's the problem with the sampling methodology. Same thing with if you're doing any type of analysis on any large data set, you're undoubtedly using some subset of the data. With quantum computing, you're using all of the data. And that's why when we're looking at something like forecasting weather, assuming you can capture all the data elements, and that's the quantum computer can only deal with what it has. But if you could capture all the data elements, if we had sensors located all over the world to measure the weather, the ground heat, the radiation coming in from the sun, and all the other variables, the quantum computer in real time could tell you what was going to happen with the weather, not only immediately, but forecast ahead. Kim talked about, could a quantum computer play chess? Chess is the game of anticipating what the other person does. And so the advantage that a computer has is being able to look 10, 20, 30, 100 moves in advance. Well, quantum computer, infinite moves in advance. I mean, literally look at all the probabilities real time, instantly. A game between two quantum computers would be over so fast you wouldn't see the game occur. You know, it's that old joke about Flash doing something. You want to see me run to New York and back. You want to see it again. It would just be, I mean, instantly over. And so the nature of quantum computing really has to do with speed and massive data sets. I mean, the data sets that we cannot handle now, the quantum computer will be able to handle with ease. The one thing that really I think fascinates me is quantum pairs. The idea of being able to communicate across vast distances instantaneously. The potential here for doing amazing things is significant, but it remains largely potential because we have not been able to apply it yet. We have been able to demonstrate, however, that it works. So this isn't smoke and mirrors at this point. We know that quantum computing is achievable. And then before I drop off, I just once again want to make a correction on what general AI is. General AI is not one AI that can do everything. General AI is an AI hardware platform that can be used much like a universal tool. You can take it and put it into an automotive implementation. You can program it appropriately and it'll work there. You can take it and move it into an industrial implementation and program it and make it work there. General AI is very similar to how we think of a human. A human can do carpentry, and it can pilot a rocket ship. That's what you want in a general computer. It's not the same computer doing everything. It's just a hardware platform, hardware and software and firmware platform that can be applied to different kinds of things, much like a human can do different kinds of things in the world. And right now, we're just moving into a broad AI. That's the transformer AI capability that NVIDIA announced earlier this month, or actually last month now, I guess now, because we're in April. But we're not into general. Now, broad means you can use an AI in multiple things, just not universally yet. And so the transformer AI that NVIDIA announced can be used for autonomous machines, autonomous cars, autonomous aircraft, autonomous ships, autonomous robots, but probably would be inappropriate to use for, say, a logistics management or something along those lines. You need a different underlying platform. When we get to general computing, general AI, then that same platform could be used for all of those things. That's it. It's an economies of scale thing. It's what will drive the cost of AI and autonomous machines down to a point where we could afford to put it in your house, and your Roomba in your office or home actually does what it's supposed to do and doesn't constantly get stuck underneath your furniture. Interesting area, fascinating time. I've got to run to a quantum computing meeting, which just started 1 minute ago. Take care, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rao, for your excellent contributions, and definitely it will be valuable for our youth communities. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Well, Sharif, thank you very much. I've enjoyed the discussion. Just a couple of clarifications as well. In today, there's three types of quantum computing designs. There, the anneal one, which is the one that was really pioneered more by D-Wave before. Then there's analog computing, and then there's going to be eventually universal quantum computing. Today, we're in the first two with the quantum annealer and the analog quantum computing. Most of the what we see today, quantum computing as a service, is using the second one of those. And I can tell you that in presentations I've seen lately, one of the biggest uses of the approach of quantum computing as a server has been around logistics and trying to optimize logistics. But there is a body of programming code coming out. There's a body of standards coming out. I tweeted this morning and posted about an article on how there is now a whole effort to regulate quantum computer as we begin to see it because of its power. But what I'd like to really do in a conclusion is I can, like I say, go on and on. But I want to make a point that quantum computing is going to be fast, it's going to be powerful. The other uses of quantum technology are going to be even more breakthrough than quantum computing. But we need to understand that about our classic CMOS computing, which is what we use in our notebooks and in our smartphones and everything else. But you heard the idea of DNA computing, which is actually a form of biological computing. Biological computing is primarily DNA and RNA tied together to do computing, but there's also other types too. One of the earliest types of computing was analog computing, and analog computing is still around today. We have other types of computing where I can do morphological changes and do morphological computing as well. But one of the important points I want to make here is just like there's dozens of different types of databases, and we choose the database on what we want to do. There's dozens of different types of vehicles. You know, I wouldn't want to take an F1 race car and drive it across the swamps and try to do that. By the same token, a dune buggy is not what I would want to drive on the Autobahn in Europe. Same thing with computing. We need to realize that we need to choose the appropriate type of computer to do what we need to do. And that's why you begin to see the different uses. Why in the early quantum computing as a service, using the services from like IBM and others, we're seeing that done very much so. And we're seeing syndications come together to use them. So, you know, if I just look at where we see quantum computing as a service, Amazon's doing it, Microsoft's doing it, D-Wave's doing it, IBM, atomic computing, Honeywell is actually one of the biggest providers right now of quantum computing as a service, looking at logistics. You see Quanta, you see many others, but you also see a lot of people beginning to consult in the area of it. And even big firms like Deloitte has a huge group dedicated to advancing quantum computing. And so it's beginning to leave the, gee, this is a neat scientific thought. And we're working on the language, the ecosystem. I posted a link earlier in the internal chat of a company called StrangeWorks. StrangeWorks is a very, very interesting company because their take is they want to connect the ecosystem for quantum computing. And through their approach, you can actually sign up for free to begin to use quantum computing as a service in a limited view to begin to start the company's, the organization's journey into quantum computing. And they'll connect you to the standards and everything else that's going. That is where we're seeing quantum computing today. It's going to the point where the standards are beginning to come in place by multiple organizations, where regulations beginning to come in place, where companies are not just selling the hardware like D-Wave did 15 years ago. They're actually selling quantum computing as a service. And you're seeing companies using the early commercial availability of quantum computers to actually begin to solve world problems. And that to me is the most interesting. Final point, since this is the World Economic Talent Forum, is yes, there's going to be a lot of jobs in quantum computing. And the preparation for those jobs is very broad. Mathematics helps, physics helps, even biology helps, telecommunication. I could go on and list 20 other areas that quantum computing is going to touch and that you should prepare yourself for. But the bottom line is it's coming. Last point for me, and I don't like to talk about myself often, but if you go back to the December issue of Business Week in 1999, I was one of 7 futures chosen to say what this 100 years is going to be like. My forecast for this 100 years is going to be the age of bio. And I believe that the bio computing and the bio approach to software will actually be one of the key stakes for this. Quantum will be there to work with it, but the bio approach is more massively parallel, where quantum computing is not parallel in the way it's designed today. And so those are some of the differences. But this is something that we all need to track. If the company, if a university doesn't have a task force in place, beginning to look at how quantum computing is going to impact them and what they need to do about it, they're late and should go ahead and start that soon. So Sharif, thank you so very much. You're muted.
Thank you. This is excellent discussion. Even we are getting that response from different universities, even from Africa. They are observing today's shows and they are really happy because our major audience come from developing world. And beside this dialogue, you know that we are publishing a lot of research paper. We are advancing technology in our lab. So those who want to collaborate with World Talent Economy Forums, we are ready to do that. As well as we have our School of Talent Economy. So those who are from our speakers, those who want to take class for our student, definitely based on this Industry 4.0 subject, you can contribute. I'm sure many of the people will be benefited and we can contribute more. Mr. Thomas, so what is your concluding remark for today's dialogue?
Thank you. Yes. I have thoughts about the quantum computing, and from the developer's perspective, it's a totally new way to develop and to look at the structures of the applications, and because it's so probabilistic, so the developers need to develop and learn to develop in a different way, and that way is kind of similar to artificial intelligence and machine learning programming. So the network has a probability structure, and it's a probability. Its structure kind of creates the structure of the whole application and the use cases. And for the use cases, right now the use cases are in the large areas, like in logistics, where we have lots of different kind of options to choose. So when you have lots of different kinds of options to choose at every stage That's one kind of a way for quantum computing to solve the options faster. And there's also really interesting progress in the optical tweezer technology. That there is this French Pascual company progressing, and they presented in the NVIDIA conference their technology, and we have to see how will they get the qubits amounts with their technology to grow faster. And it's very interesting to see. But yes, the area needs lots of research and development and new kind of ways to think about the problem solvings.
Thank you. Professor Donald, what's your concluding remarks today?
I want to just read one sentence from a McKinsey report that came out at December 2021, which says, while quantum computing promises to help businesses solve problems that are beyond the reach and speed of conventional high-performance computer, use cases are largely experimental and hypothetical at this early stage. And so basically, it's pointed out that McKinsey, who's one of the top analytic firms, does not believe that quantum computers are actually being used in business right now. What they're being used for, and you can go, IBM has simulations of quantum computing, and so if you want to start training yourself, learning how to program quantum computers and being able to start working on the kinds of problems that Thomas has been talking about. Kitos, nice presentation, thank you. Kitos, and what he's been talking about, you can, because IBM and others have made quantum computing platforms available to you. There's libraries and other kinds of things so that you can actually start learning how to do it. And you know, who knows, 5 years, 10 years, people keep making these predictions and then we don't really know. And it's something I think when we talk about, people talked about existential threats, Adam has talked about it and things like that. And the real existential threats that has happened from the computers and the internet is the ability for anybody to tell a story that about reality that other people just believe. And what winds up happening is that we've developed these microcultures, or these cultures that have realities that are based on these stories and these narratives that people create to manipulate them in various kinds of ways. And the whole idea of logic or fact or reality has kind of gone out the window. I mean, people actually don't seem to care, a lot of people. Yeah, so people will just make up facts and just say, well, this is true because this, that, and the other thing. And people go, well, it must be true because this person said, you know, that this fact, and the other. And it's causing conflict in society and causing conflict within ourselves. And I think that's our biggest existential threat. It doesn't really have anything specifically to do with computers. I think, and I think that we should be really careful on this show because we have a powerful voice, and a lot of what we're talking about is really interesting science fiction. But whenever we say, oh, all we have to do is just solve this one little teeny problem and we'll have machine learning that's as good as humans, and all we have to do is solve this one little teeny problem, and we look at the one little teeny problem, and it's something that we've been working on for decades, and we don't even have the faintest idea how to approach it, then we might ask ourselves the question, is that really a teeny problem, or is it a very, very big problem that we don't have the faintest idea how to solve, which is what a lot of the teeny problems we've been talking about are. So I think that we should be, careful in ourselves to try and not be one of the people that are making the problems in the world. So, and I
Thank
know
you.
we are. Everybody
Thank you.
tries really hard.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Thank you. I know it's now become a bit of a cliche, but now it is high time that we allow ourselves time to catch up to our own ingenuity. I mean, having advanced technology is one thing, but having the appropriate discipline and wisdom to use it responsibly would be ideal. But that could be perhaps even more tricky than building the stuff. Who gets to write the guidelines, instructions, treaters? How do we pick the people we trust enough to write these guidelines? How can we calculate whether or not we are collectively intelligent enough to make the right choice of person tasked with writing these things, and so on and on? Like with nuclear weapons, the technology itself is advanced, darkly advanced, but without the necessary discipline, impulse control, long-term goal setting, can we even become more wise and intelligent enough to feel confident enough to be able to handle these technologies, or have we maxed out? Maybe we should wait and not innovate until we have enhanced intelligence and enhanced moral frameworks, which could come in time with brain-computer interfaces being introduced, as well as the hopefully intelligence-enhancing properties of BCIs. But then, of course, BCIs are its own technology that may require guidelines and commandments and ethical and moral constraints to prevent disasters, misadventures, suffering, man-made horrors beyond our comprehension, as Nikola Tesla once put it. So maybe all of us here could write them, who knows, like Asimov did with the robot rules. But yeah, it's very, very nuanced, very tricky.
Thank you. Professor Ching, what's your concluding remarks for today's dialogue?
Okay. As the founder of Post Science, I would like to introduce some logic into science instead of just experimental data. Okay. The example here is we need to gain a more fundamental understanding of quantum mechanics first with logic. Okay, science lacks logic. It's all based on some laws of nature. Okay, you observe, then you say that's a laws of nature. Then you have a deterministic system by use the laws of nature as the last equation necessary to create a deterministic system for prediction. Okay, so here we have a quantum mechanics. There's two possible process of change at the smallest scale of quantum mechanics. The first process is instantaneous. You go from 0 to 1 instantaneous. The second process, gradual or a fuzzy process. The more plausible or logical choice is that the process of change must be fuzzy. It goes through a range of tolerance. In quantum mechanics, it's the probability defined by the Schrodinger's equation. Okay, so quantum mechanics, you can say logically, follows the logic of gradual change, fuzzy change. Okay, so that also I solved the problem of complete automated software. So far, 10 people who support me, and the few can understand. Almost nobody can understand. The only other 2 people who work toward complete automation were Alan Turing and John von Neumann. So basically, there is something, in something productive in quantum computing, introduce some new way of thinking about computing, or introduce nature into the picture. Okay, follow a natural process, looking for computers in the universe. Okay, starting this process. But whether it's going to work or not, well, I guess just like everything else, there's lots of talk, but who knows? I have no idea, except I talk to my friends. They seem to be pessimistic. Okay, that's my conclusion.
Thank you. Thank you. This is excellent discussion, I'm sure. For our partners, those from university, from the developing world, it's really, really good content for them. And I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government, with your corporation, and with the academy. And I'm also getting many response from different university, from Africa, from Singapore, from Asia. So they are really, really like today's discussion. So hopefully through this process, we will educate more people. Through this process, we will engage with more communities, and we will develop a knowledge-based community. And with Professor Ching, we are also working for next new world. Maybe this way we can uplifting the society, and your contribution, the speaker, those who from the developed world, you have enough knowledge, enough resources. Your contributions will be very helpful for the developing world. That is the way we can work together. We can contribute more. And I just want to declare that already in India we are launching our conference, Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. Those who want to publish paper, you can submit your paper. In Singapore, we are working with futuristic leadership related issues, and hopefully those who want to train the futuristic leaders, they can join with us. As well as yesterday's session, we collaborate with Dr. Talib Rafael, especially in the Middle East. So we will launch our innovation lab in Middle East. So hopefully it will be a very, very interesting journey for all of us. And I ensure this World Talent Economy Forum, this is not my organization, this is people's organization. This is Madam Kimberly, Mr. Adam, Professor Ching, Professor David Smith, our new friends from Finland, Thomas, Professor Donalds, everyone. This is your organization, you contribute, you redesign the whole process, and we will rebuild the new world with your knowledge, with your resources. That is our commitment. And we are getting huge response from the developing world. And they are really, really interested to invite all of our speakers in their country. So hopefully it will be very, very effective collaborations around the world. Thank you, our honorable speakers, for your excellent contribution for today's sessions. Even every day, I'm also learning, our audience also learning, our whole community learning through this open dialogue and through our classes. So thank you, bye-bye, and take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kiitos Donald.
Kiitos.